Welcome to the Scared But Not Damaged podcast, a podcast that supports, empowers, and inspires women that have experienced abuse or experiencing emotional trauma or pain. This podcast will challenge you to push against the tides and rewrite your story. On this show, I will be sharing some of the principles of Scared But Not Damaged, a life that has gone through adversity and abuse and has come out strong in spite of life's challenges. Despite the scars, your worth and your value remains intact and undamaged. Each week, we will discuss topics like what is abuse, what are the red flags that you are in an abusive relationship or marriage. I am your host, Naomi. Okay. Hello, everyone. And welcome to Scared But Not Damaged podcast. Today we're going to record the 15th episode, number 15, and I have a special guest in the house. I guess you'll be wondering, who's the special guest? Okay. The special guest I have in the house is a lady that's gone through thick and thin. She's gone through the storms. She's gone through the darkest of all darkness, and she's brought out light. She's brought hope, and she's been through the fire and burnt. She has scars, but then she's stronger than ever. The scars don't define her. She defines the scars, and she's someone that's gone through so much. And I'll call her an epitome of resilience. So I'm going to introduce to us today Charlene Madden. Charlene is a speaker. She's published. She's a published poet. She's a Reiki practitioner, an empowerment coach, and she's happily married. So I welcome you, Charlene Madden.
Good morning or good afternoon,
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you.
Excellent.
Charlene is joining us today from America.
Canada.
From Canada, yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
we are happy to have you here, and my listeners are excited to have you on the show today. So Charlene, I was just wondering if I left any part of your introduction out, if I left anything out.
I would say just I'm a mom of 3 amazing kids. So that would be they're all grown and
they're all grown,
out, but yeah, all grown and moved.
They're not all adults in their own rights. Oh, okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to tell us a fun fact about you, Charlene.
If I had to pick one, I would probably say that I'm kind of a mix of a city girl and a country girl.
Wow.
I grew up in a small town. I moved to the city. Now I'm living back in a small town, and I love designer shoes and wearing nice clothes. But I have a farm, and I have goats, and I love being out there and spending time with my animals. That's probably when I'm the happiest, is when I'm outside with animals.
That's nice. You can take the farmer out of the farm, but you can't take the farm away from the farmer.
Exactly.
So I'm so excited to have you here today. Wow. Charlene, your story is incredible kind of story, and it's a story that people would not believe, because the fact that you're alive and you went through that, I mean, literally saying the story is like people think one is lying, so that's why sometimes it's good to have the person. And today, normally I do my podcast and I don't do the videos, but I've started recording videos as well, because so that they'll see the live person. They know someone went through this. And if you can go through this and come out strong on the other side, it's a powerful thing. And that empowers people to know that they are not alone. In your own time, you would have felt you were alone, but you went through that. The universe allowed you to go through that to keep you alive today for such a time as this, to help a lot of people still in that dungeon. So thank you so much. And it's really a pleasure to have you here. How did it all start, going back to your childhood, and especially when your parents separated? I don't know if you can talk us through that.
Yeah, I was the youngest of four kids. I had an older sister, 4 years older than myself. And then I had brothers, half brothers. They had different father. They were 8 years older than myself. And growing up, we lived in a very dysfunctional household. My father was a very violent alcoholic. And most of the abuse was directed at my brothers because they weren't biologically his, so they were an easy target. So when I was about 3.5, my mother decided that she was going to leave my dad, tried to take all of us kids. And of course, my dad was not going to let her take us two girls.
How old did you say you were?
I was 3.5.
Wow, 3.5.
3.5. So we stayed with my dad for 2 weeks, but unfortunately, because he was such a severe alcoholic, there was no way he could raise a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. So he contacted my maternal grandparents, my mom's parents, and asked if they would be willing to take us in. And my grandmother didn't skip a beat. She said, absolutely. My grandmother was an absolutely amazing woman, very actually, I think she was pretty far along for her time era. She was believed in, working and women working, supporting themselves, getting a good education. And she really pushed that on us. So she was an amazing woman. My grandfather, on the other hand, was a pedophile. And we went through about 9 years of sexual abuse at the hands of my grandfather. And it really made a difficult childhood even more difficult because growing up, I was so afraid as a child. I remember my first memory sitting on my grandparents' front porch by myself. And that seemed to be the residual memories that I have, was always feeling alone. And I think that really set the tone for my life in general, that feeling of alone and needing to feel wanted and needed. So that was kind of I apologize if you can hear my dog barking in the background there, but so we went through these 9 years of abuse. And then when I was 12, my older sister, who had suffered the worst end of the abuse because she was the older, she kind of had a nervous breakdown and everything came out. So, here I am, I'm 12 and we're living in a very small town. And now everyone in town knows what had happened. So in my mind, I was not only the girl whose parents didn't want her, because that was the message that I had told myself. I was now the girl who had been sexually abused by her own grandfather. And it was just this shame that I felt and internalized that shame. So that was the start of kind of the downhill. As bad as it was with the abuse, it was almost the shame of everyone knowing was almost worse than the abuse in itself. So
wow. And I can imagine the pain you went through, because in them days, sexual abuse or incest was something people never talk about. It was something you kept really quiet. And I guess because of the fear you experienced as a child, you couldn't speak out, and your parents were never there to save you because they went their separate ways. And that was the beginning of your pain, because you're like going from one trauma to another, because separation itself causes trauma. It causes self-rejection. And you were about to deal with that. You literally at 3.5, you didn't even know what was happening. And there you were again with a very traumatic situation, which I don't think any child should go through. So I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and having that fear, I think that if I said anything, that I would get sent away again from the only family that I knew. It's if I tell my grandma is she going to be mad and is she going to send us away? Because she had been the only person, the only constant I had in my life.
Wow.
So it was this fear of, you know, if I say something, do I lose that as well? So that was a, you know, a huge weight as well for both my sister and I. So, but, and I mean, and even after the abuse came out, like you were saying, you know, we're talking, this was like early 80s when this all came out. There was no counseling given. I mean, you know, social services stepped in for a short period of time, but, you know, I kind of remember the lady sitting in her office and, you know, her kind of rubbing my back saying, don't worry, everything will be okay. You'll be okay. And that just seemed to be the resounding message as well that kind of, you know, perpetuated my life. There was always a pat on the back saying, you're going to be okay. And inside, I never really felt okay.
Yeah, because I mean, telling you'll be okay, they don't know that because you have to go through therapy. You needed to speak out. And in those days, no one even talks about domestic abuse. Nobody talks about sexual abuse. It's all hidden. They hush you, you know, so it never really comes out. So I think nobody was prepared at that time there was no support, you know, so that must have been a very, very difficult place that you have been. But unfortunately, in times like this as well, where they have the support, children are still scared. You know, people are still scared. You were even too. You had a sister, you understand, and yet you both of you could not speak because the only constant you knew, the only source of support you knew was your grandma, your grandparents, and you didn't want to lose that. So I understand that fear. And today, kids, even when they're in their parents' home, they can't even still speak because the fear is still there. That's the fear of entanglement comes with shame and all that, and the fear of unknown. What's going to happen? Would they believe me? Would they not believe me? It's still happening today. So a lot of people are still stuck in there. And it's good to know that, yes, in your time, you didn't even get support. Today, it's still happening. The support out there, but people can speak. And I think that's like the trap of what domestic abuse or sexual abuse does. It keeps this trap and this fear. For a child, you don't know any better. All you want is, oh, I'm even better here. At least the danger I know and I understand is better for me. I can maneuver than the danger I don't know out there, which is tragic. No child should go through that. Wow. I really commend your courage, Charlene, for as a child, that was so traumatic. No, that was a devastating experience for a child to go through, to know that it's so much, is double pain from your parents living and your granddad doing that to you. I was just also wondering how did you transition to adulthood? Because you grew up with that. Yeah, I was just wondering how you transitioned. How did you cope or manage going back to your transitioning from a child to adulthood with that experience of your life?
I would say I did transition very well, which I mean is the case for a lot of childhood, you know, sexual abuse victims.
Yeah.
I went from the abuse being coming out and going public to going into high school, and so I'm now becoming a teenager. So you've got all these extra issues that you're dealing with as a teenager. You know, your emotions are running wild. You're entering high school, which is a whole new environment.
Yeah.
And I had not received any counseling. So very early on into high school, I started suffering with mental illness issues. I started cutting. I was suicidal, had suicidal ideologies constantly. And my way of coping with it at the time was, other than the cutting, was I wrote. I always said I poured ink onto paper instead of blood, right? And that was my way of expressing all these emotions that I had built up, trying to put it out in a healthy way. And of course, when you're writing about dark stuff, suicide, death, it usually draws attention. And I remember being called into my guidance counselor's office at school because my English teacher had notified them that they were concerned about my writing. And of course, my history got brought up of the abuse. And they did a psychological evaluation on me and said, you know, I remember just clear as day, the psychologist saying, okay, well, we've diagnosed you as being manic depressive and bipolar.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. And I remember her patting me on the back and saying, but don't worry, you're going to be okay. And I thought, wow, it's the exact same, right? So I'm seeing the pattern. So I was like, I wish people would stop telling me I'm going to be okay, because I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not okay. I'm struggling, and I'm just trying to keep my head above water at this point. And, of course, going home, and my grandmother was like, okay, well, we don't want to talk about that. So now I had this feeling of shame of, no, I'm the child that no one wanted. I'm the child that, was sexually abused. And now I'm crazy on top of it, and I'm like, how do you deal with all of this? But I just did. I kept writing. I tried to tone it down a little bit because I wanted to not be that crazy kid. And I just managed. I threw myself into my schooling and tried to get through school, turned to alcohol. Was drinking heavily as a teenager. I mean, every weekend it was, drunk somewhere. Was smoking marijuana, all the time. Managed to barely squeak my way through high school. And as soon as high school was over, I knew I wanted to move, because I thought, if I could just move, everything will be different. Because sometimes we think geography is the defining force in our lives. And if I just move away, everything will be different. No, I'll be fine. And once I graduated high school, I moved away with my high school sweetheart, who I'd been dating since 16, and moved to the city and thought everything was going to be great, but it wasn't, because I wasn't okay. And it was just relocating. But wherever I went, I always say, wherever I went, there I was.
I was just going to say something, Charlene. Sorry. It's isn't it funny how we think, because we're going through something, and we think, okay, if I live here where people know me, and where this incident happened, and go somewhere else, I will be a lot better. Funny enough, because we're still going in that dysfunctional state. We're moving with that state, and you go somewhere else, that person hasn't changed. You've not gotten help. Your situation wasn't resolved. So you still moved from point A to point B, exactly the same. The difference might be the environment, but which you might settle in with a bit of ease, and yet you now realize that you're still, the same thing is happening to you. So it kind of resonates with when people think, oh, because of this issue, if I move here, that's not it. That situation has to be resolved. You need to fix that issue, so that when you go somewhere else, it now becomes a new start.
Yeah, you have to do the work, because you're dragging that baggage along with you. And if you're not willing to set it down and leave it there, it's going to come with you. So it's definitely about doing the work. So I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart. We had 3 beautiful kids together, but I hadn't done any work. And I kept thinking that having a child would make my life complete, because I would have someone in my life who was going to be there forever, that I could love, and that would love me back unconditionally, like I hadn't had. And so every child, it was great for a while, but then the depression would set back in. And I hit a point when my son was about just over 1.5 years, and I had become so extremely suicidal that I was afraid that I was going to take my life with my kids there. And I made a choice to leave the house. I left my kids with my husband, because I knew I was in no mental condition to take 3 kids and try to make a go of it. So I left my husband, and he was kind of like, okay, yeah, see ya. And I was like, okay, that was not the reaction I expected. But I moved on, and he quite quickly moved on with his life. And a month after I separated from my husband, I got into another relationship. And I will just to touch back on my husband. My husband was an extremely passive man. And I think that's what I was looking for at the time. I was looking for someone I could control, and I don't mean like violently control, but I needed to be
In
the
control.
breadwinner. Yeah, I needed to set the relationship up so that he needed me, because as long as he needed me, he would never leave. Because I had such this aching fear of that everyone I loved was going to leave me eventually. That's the way it had seemed, as my inner child had thought. So, and I mean, and kind of being in a controlling relationship like that, where it's so one-sided, didn't help my mental health issues. So I left my husband, and a month later got into a relationship with someone who was completely the polar opposite. And this was the man who was the controller. Wow. And it wasn't 2 months into the relationship, and the violence started. Wow. And I was in such a dark place that I think I kind of felt like I deserved it, that this was the best it was going to get for me. I had guilt for leaving my children. I had guilt for walking away from my marriage. I had so much guilt, and had in my mind had so much ill treatment. I felt like I had been used and abused by everybody who loved me anyway, that this just fit that puzzle. It was just that piece that fit right into it. And it was over a decade of abuse and adultery on his part, and drug use on his part. I had quit, smoking marijuana or anything like that, but still was drinking heavily. So it being in such a bad spot mentally, and then getting in a relationship with someone who was in a really bad spot mentally as well, just was a recipe for disaster. Yeah. So and I mean, and he had suffered his own childhood abuse, physical abuse at the hands of his father. So that was the only way he knew. He had seen his father be abusive. So to him, that was the way, you treated people. You were, violent, and you were domineering, and you were just that way. So he, I gave up my anger towards him a long time ago, and understand he was unfortunately a product of his environment as well, which is as yourself. Yeah, we were, so two dysfunctional people coming together.
Wow, that is not. I mean, you guys had so much similarities, and we're both helpless in both cases. Like I would say, I heard there's a research has been carried out that proves that shows people that have gone through domestic abuse or sexual abuse always tend to attract, on a very high percentage, the same kind of people that would abuse them. Mm-hmm. The research has been done over the years, both in England and in America, and the research carried out on domestic violence, that they find out that these people is either becomes transgenerational, or the same people attract, like a partner lives. A woman was abused by maybe a father or mother abused the mom. That child carries that burden, goes into a relationship. That guy abuses that same woman. She goes into another one. So she just keeps that pattern going. Yes, except they tend to work on themselves. But that is so true. If you got the help you should have been accorded to at the time, and you'd have healed, but you didn't know any better. So everyone is looking for the love. You're looking for, there's this neediness, there's this vacuum, there's this space you want to feel in your heart. You feel empty. And that's why you also turn to drugs, and not like it was your fault. You needed to numb. The pain is emotional. People don't see trauma. Like I say, it's not like I have a headache or I got a blister here and you patch it up with a Band-Aid. No, it's trauma. You don't know. The only thing you see people act it out. You act it, and some people are so good, they don't act it out, but I mean, in their innate environment, you just know something is not right with you. And a pat on the back would not do it. Like I say to people, you need support. You need someone that really cares for you, to take you through, to know when the triggers are coming, just to be there. have good friends, and it's so hard in times like this to have all of that. But then you also need the inner will, resilience. Anyone that's ever, I always like give I kind of celebrate women or men that have gone through these experiences and they're able to stand tall today. Was the journey easy? No, but because they've got a purpose and because they're here to help this people in this time and season. I mean, that's why we have the likes of Charlene. I mean, you've gone through brutal. No one deserves to go through such a childhood. I would say you never had a childhood. That was it. Was snatched away from you from the minute your parents left. And I believe there are people like that today out there that are going through the same and will feel, oh my God, they can't speak out of fear. But the truth is, you better speak out. When you speak out, that thing stops. I know it's difficult, but you never spoke. That's why you didn't get the help at that time. But thank God for your sister that could speak up after so many years of abuse. You know, that's the thing that we're telling people, the awareness we're creating, that people should learn to speak out, because that's the first stage of your freedom, first stage of liberation. If you don't speak out, it's going to continue. But once you speak out, that event can stop, will definitely stop. So it's a good thing you're doing what you're doing. So the next thing I'm going to ask is, I was just wondering the impact. I know you've suffered mental health issues like you did as a child, and that still kind of went on as an adult because you went into an abusive relationship again, that there was instability, you know. So what were the major impact of you suffered from domestic abuse with this man that kind of continued as in your adulthood?
I would say that the abuse just kept perpetuating that feeling. I think I endured the abuse as long as I did because I didn't have a sense of worth. And again, that coming from my childhood, right? Absolutely. And I mean, and that I think that's really the key, is that we are so beaten down physically, mentally, emotionally, that you feel like you don't deserve any better. This is what I'm going to get. And for me, it was like, okay, yeah, I'm getting, choked, and I'm getting, slapped, and I'm getting, verbally beat down, and of course, as standard, the next day it's the apologies. And I thought, as long as he stays, I'm willing to go through anything. Wow. That's, almost the way it was. And then, he actually made the decision to end the relationship. He had committed adultery throughout the entire relationship. And I remember it was July 1st, which is Canada Day here in Canada. And he came home and said, I'm leaving. And I was like, you're leaving? And it was like every fear and insecurity that I had as a child just came rushing back. And I remember begging him. And I think about it now, and I'm like, I begged the man who abused me not to leave. And I mean, and I look at it, and I had no sense of self. My whole sense of a being was dependent on someone else validating me. I needed someone to love me. That's my entire life. I just need someone to love me. I remember thinking, and it's like, and I can't get anyone to. So he left. And, I was like, luckily I had an amazing support group of friends who were like, no, girl, we're going to get you through this. A lot of them knew what had been going on, and they just kind of kept me busy and kept me preoccupied. And I was like, I felt like I was slowly getting back to the person that I wanted to be. I was developing a little bit of self-confidence. And I remember sitting at work. The one day I worked in a pub, and I remember I just finished working, and a police officer walked in, and this had been a police officer who had been involved in a domestic incident. And he asked if he could see me outside, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe he's just checking up on me. And I remember him taking me outside and saying, hey, I want you to know your ex-partner is dead. He shot and killed himself. And I was devastated. I was like, my whole world in that moment, I just felt it collapse around me. And I think part of me had always thought that even though I had this persona of, oh, I was getting better. Oh, yeah, look at me, I'm doing great. I think in the back of my mind, I always thought maybe he'll come back. Maybe, he'll love me enough that he'll get better and he won't do this to me. And it felt like the ultimate leaving, like this was a person who left me for good. There was no chance that this person was ever going to come back. And it emotionally kind of crippled me. And I felt, again, I had learning to live with mental health and the abuse. You always learn to, you always put on that good face, right? Where no one knows what you're going through.
Wear the mask.
Because we are masters of those masks. And I put that mask on and pretended like I was okay. And I wasn't. And I felt like the whole, world had just become such an unbalanced place. And I mean, within a year, I was planning on taking my own life again, and I was 2 days away from killing myself when everything changed for me.
Wow.
So.
Wow. You must, that's really a lot. And the fact that you can't even come to terms that he left you for good and you still wanted him back, that's the highest level of your identity was just off the roof, and that's why a lot of people suffer when they go through domestic abuse. A lot of women, they lose their identity. I lost my identity for so long, I didn't even know who I was, but they at some moment where the sanity, in my quiet place, I kind of just bring a picture of who I used to be. And when I look at that picture, it tells me you were this, you were this, you were professional, you were this, you were all put together. What happened to you? So I knew I had hope that I was going to get back to that, the known that I knew, who I used to be. At least if I can get myself closer by there, then I can make that journey. So but it's not everybody that gets the opportunity. Some people just end it because several times you're like, ending it makes it easier because the pain goes away. Ending it is the only way, because you can't really tell people. It's every time. I mean, even when you've told your friends it's happening, how many times you want to go tell them again? Then some people cannot even open their mouth to speak it out, to say it, and it keeps them in that very dark place, and anything can happen in that place. So, Charlene, I would like you to tell us, how did you can you tell us when you wanted to end it for yourself, and what was the turning point that saved you, that we have you here today?
Well, like I said, I got to a point, it was in October of 2015. I had just bought a house. In September, I took possession of a house, and I remember all my family and friends were so excited for me because, oh, you bought a house, this is great. She's making plans for the future. I was even seeing a psychologist at the time, and she's like, oh, I'm so proud of you. And I'm thinking to myself, none of these people know that I bought this house because I'm going to kill myself. And it's the only legacy that I have to leave my children. I didn't have a lot of money. I'd actually received a life insurance policy from my ex-partner who had taken his life. So I, took that money, put a down payment on a house, and that was what I was going to leave to my children. So in October, a girl I had was working with at the time said, hey, I'm going to this lady's workshop. You should come with me. And I'm like, she's like, come on, get this VIP ticket. It's like $120. Come with me. And I was like, okay, right. Cause I was such a people pleaser. And I bought this ticket, and I'm thinking, why are you buying this ticket? Like, you're not even going to be here, or, like, you don't want to be here. So I bought the ticket for the event, and I remember pulling up to the event on the Saturday and going, I have 2 days to get through, because in the back of my car, my SUV, I had a hunting rifle, and I had planned the following Monday morning that I was going to go to the same spot my ex had taken his life, and I was going to take my own life as well. And I was resolved to that fact. I was like, I just don't want to, I was tired of hurting and tired of pretending. So I walked into that workshop with all those ladies, and I felt so out of place. Here I am with a bunch of women that are all excited, and they're talking about how great their life is, and they're talking about all the things they're planning on doing. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, I'm not happy, and I'm planning on taking my life, and I've just got to slap that mask on for 2 more days to get through, and everything will be fine. The pain will go away. And I remember listening to these speakers, and the first few speakers I didn't really, connect with. There was a financial advisor, and there was some health and fitness people, and I was like, okay, this is great.
That's not the issue I'm here for.
Yeah. And then a lady got up and spoke, and she spoke about, her name is Vanessa McWilliams, and she has alopecia, so she has no hair. And she talked about developing self-love, and how much her life had changed when she learned to love and accept herself as she was. And I'm listening to her story, and I'm like, wow, like, look at her, everything that she's gone through and everything that she faces on a daily basis, and she loves herself. And it's like, I kind of heard this little voice in the back of my head saying, like, well, what about you? And I thought, well, why can't I love myself? Because I didn't love myself. And then the next speaker got up, and her name was Shiloh Fayed, and she spoke about living with mental illness and depression, and how she had changed her life, and how her life was absolutely amazing now. And I'm thinking, again, I can hear that little voice in the back of my head going, well, what about you? Like, yeah, you're suffering from mental health and depression, and why can't your life be great? Right. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of trying to silence this little voice because it's getting louder. And then the next speaker gets up, and his name is Jared Morrison. And he spoke about living with mental health issues, addictions to drugs and alcohol, and how he was minutes away from, he'd been working most of his life, or his adult life, on trying to find that perfect cocktail of drugs and alcohol that he could mix together, where he would just overdose, and it would look like, an innocent overdose, and his kids would get his life insurance money. And I was like, well, that kind of sounds familiar. And he had his children one night, and unfortunately, that was the night he found that perfect combination, and he was slowly overdosing on his couch. And he heard this voice going, no, not now, not like this. And he picked up the phone, called, emergency services, and it changed his life. He realized that, he didn't want to live. And he realized how many people, men especially, were out there suffering, and they didn't have, no one was talking about it. No one was sharing their stories. And I was like, I felt so connected, because, here was a man talking about mental health. And I was like, maybe if a man had spoken about mental health, my ex-partner would still be here, because he had kept, his mental health issues were just, no one spoke about it. And I thought, and here he is, he's sharing every struggle he's had to help people. And I heard that voice in the back of my head again, but this time it's like loud. And it's like, what about you? And I thought, it was like, like you hear light bulb moment, aha moment, whatever you want to call it. That was the moment that saved my life. And I went, what if I can live with my mental health issues and my depression and be okay? What if I can learn to love myself and stop needing someone else to love me? What if just loving myself is enough?
Wow.
And what if I can take every crappy situation and thing I have gone through in my life, and what if I can share that to give someone else hope like these people did for me? And that was it. Like that was it. I left that day. That was a Saturday. I left that Saturday. I went home. I contacted a friend of mine. I said, I need to give you all of my, because I was a hunter, like to go out. And I said, I need to give you all of my guns. And he's like, what? And I said, just don't ask me any questions. Just please take them. I needed everything out of my house, and I needed to start fixing me. And that started me on the path of going, okay, you know what? It's okay if you're alone. I made the decision that night to go, you know what? I am going to spend the rest of my life alone. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm going to love me enough that I'm going to overflow, my own cup with my own self-love. I don't need anybody else to fill it. I will fill my own cup. And that started everything. I remember talking to the lady that hosted the event and saying, you know what, like, now's not the time, but one day I'm going to tell you the impact that this event had on my life. And she's like, okay. And I said, you know what, next year I want to come back here and I want to speak at this event. And she was like, oh, okay. She probably thought, oh yeah, or whatever. Right. And that was it. That was in October. And I started making the changes in my life that have changed everything. Wow. And for the better. I decided to stop letting fear control me, because I had spent so many years trapped in this fear of people not liking me, people knowing my story, living under the shame. And I just went, no more. Like, I'm going to openly talk about sexual abuse and childhood trauma. Because I know there's people that are suffering and still haven't told their story. I need people to know that it's okay. I'm going to talk to women about, hey, yeah, I went through, 13 years of domestic violence and emotional abuse. I got through it. I went through 3 decades of mental health and wanting to end my life because I didn't like the person that I was. And I thought I needed other people to define my value. And it's like, no, I define my value. And my value says that I don't deserve to be in any kind of a relationship other than a loving and supportive one.
Absolutely. Well, Charlene, I don't even know where to start from. You have shaken, like where I come from, they call it shaking the tables. You've shaken, you've broken the legs, you've brought things, all the stereotypes, all the, those things people keep, like, oh, the big elephant. You've brought it down, because these are the things that have kept a lot of people in bondage. The fear, the stigma. Funny enough, they're going to talk about me. Victim, you are a victim. These people are victimized, and yet the perpetrators walk out free. And people tend to live with this pain, the shame of what they never cursed. It's not something you did to yourself. It's something someone else did. All we needed is support and love. Like I keep saying to people, if you know anyone going through mental health issues, domestic violence or such, all you need is wrap your hands around. They need love because they feel empty inside. We don't want another death. We don't want someone to take their life. We don't want because life is beautiful. Life is sweet. And I don't think anyone has a right, because for every death that goes, there's somebody responsible. So definitely, if that person was never abused, you won't feel that void, and you won't feel. People take drugs, and I tell people, don't even judge people. They are trying to numb a pain. For every homeless or drug addict you see, it's something that is making them do that. Go to the root. Why are they like this? Don't go, oh, judging. No, if you sit down and look, there's nobody that was born to, like, I want to take drugs. Nobody goes in their right mind to say, I want to go numb, because they want to numb a pain that nobody understands. The pain makes them act in a way that they don't understand. Like, people should empathize more. And if you can't empathize, just walk along, let someone come that would empathize. These people need love. We need love. All you need is tender, loving care from supportive friends. And I know a lot of people don't understand domestic abuse. A lot of people don't understand sexual abuse. And that's because there's no awareness. And that's why it's time we speak about this. And I always say to people, wherever domestic abuse is happening, sexual abuse is around the corner. It's always so true. They work hand in hand. Most times, it's always the case.
Yeah.
But when people, like I say, when a relationship no longer serves you, like I say to the mother, go with your kids. Like, if your mother took you guys, maybe that would have never happened, because I don't know that. I'm not blaming anyone now, but I'm just saying, for people listening, if you've got to leave a relationship that doesn't serve you, it's fine. Leave. But leave. If you're a parent, as long as it's not mental health issues, because if you've got mental health, the social services have to take care of the kids come first. But don't leave your kids behind. If you can handle them, move them along with you, because the kids suffer things that are beyond their control, things that they are not able to speak. And when they grow up with this pain, and they begin to replicate, because you can't give what you don't have. In as much as you tried your best, God blessed you with a good husband, but you were dysfunctional. You could not survive that loving, even that relationship. You had to go somewhere else, and that was all you knew. And that's the thing that happens with everyone. It's like the symptoms is the same for a lot of people. We have a uniqueness, but the symptoms, the impact is the same. It's always mental health, post-traumatic stress, high blood pressure, medical. It's the same for a lot of people. That's why awareness is good. And people don't know. If you go through domestic violence, they think it ends there. And once you leave the man, your life has sorted. No, you move with the trauma. The trauma starts happening. I didn't even realize I noticed what I went through. I went through emotional abuse. I didn't know anything about trauma. But I found that I used to be a very quiet person. I said, seeing myself getting very irritated. Everything was irritable towards me. I now became bitter, because how did I get here? How did I allow someone else do this to me? And now became so needy. And I was like, how did I get here? A very confident girl before, so when I look at a flip side, if I flip the coin, who I used to be and who I was after I left was like, wow. And it takes a whole lot of journey, years to come out of it. Physically, you look okay, but emotionally, a lot of people are destroyed. They become dysfunctional. But then that's where one working like you did, you went to do the work on yourself. I'm currently doing work on myself as well. And it's a long toll. It's a long trail. Abuse is abuse. The impact is devastating. People don't know. So I'm really, really so glad you were able to take us through your childhood, because you suffered double abuse: childhood abuse, sexual, and you suffered domestic abuse, violence, and emotional as an adult. I only suffered emotional, and my life was almost going like caving in. So I can imagine what your life was. And I'm really so glad, I'm grateful for the universe and for that friend to have directed you there, because now we have Charlie, and now you can help other women like you're doing. So I'll just because we're coming towards the end of the show, I'd like you to tell us how you found love again, briefly. You must be so brave to have found love again, because of all you've been through. And because most women that have gone through domestic abuse or sexual abuse, a lot of them believe, because they've been in a bad place, in a bad relationship, they just don't see that happening for them, love happening. So I just, thank God there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I just like you, let's not just talk about the stories of woe. Let's just, tell us the part where you found love, like you could find love again, just to encourage other women or other people.
I think for me, it was the most important love I found was the love for myself. Right. And that would be what I would say to people before you go looking for love from anybody else. You need to develop that love for yourself.
You need to love you first.
Absolutely. Because once I loved myself, I had some clear boundaries for myself. I knew the type of person I wanted to bring into my life. And I mean, and I was not looking, I will put this right out there, because I had already made the decision that I was not going to be
alone
in another relationship. But it's funny how the universe goes, okay. You know, I knew that I was never going to be with someone who was going to control or dictate or be violent or anything like that. And you know, and like I said, it's so bizarre how it happened. I always say, God, universe, whatever you believe in. It was when I learned to love myself that the universe brought into my life someone who could love me as much as I loved myself.
No.
And when I did that first workshop, part of the one of the speakers had said, I want you to do a list of fears. And this is actually something I work with with my clients, is write 6 things down on a list that scare you, intimidate you, and write 1 to 6. And then I want you to roll the dice, and whatever number comes up first, that's the one that you do. So I had, 6 things on my list that terrified me. And one of them was ask someone out on a date, because I still had that fear of rejection, right? That I wasn't going to be good enough. And I said to myself, it's like, okay, so I asked someone out, he says, no, it's fine. I'm not looking for a relationship anyway. That's an easy one to check off the list. So I had a friend of mine's brother had just moved to the area, and I went to him and I said, hey, I have a Christmas party. Would you like to go as my date? And he's like, yeah, I would love to. And I was like, oh, okay. Right. Like, oh, darn, that was not what okay. And that was our first date. And 8 months later, we got married. Everything happened so fast, but it was like, he was the culmination of everything that I had knew I deserved. He was loving, supportive, gentle, caring. Like, it was, everything that I could ask for in a person. And here he was. Wow. And I was just like, okay, but I wasn't ready. If I would have met him prior to, nothing would have happened, because I wasn't ready to receive the kind of love that he was going to bring into my life. So yeah, I spent a lot of work. And I mean, even now he's so super supportive. I mean, I did a live workshop last year, because the lady that had hosted the workshop, I'll go back. So the following year, I actually did go back and speak at that same workshop, the one that had changed my life. And I had said when I was on stage that my goal is to save just one life. If by me sharing my story can save a life, then every struggle I've gone through is worth it.
Worth it.
And I had a lady come up to me after the workshop, and she said, I just want you to know, you said you wanted to save a life. I want you to know that you did. And she turned and walked away. And I still get goosebumps. It's amazing. Every time I tell that story, I get goosebumps. And I thought, check, then that's worth it. Everything I've gone through is worth it. And so I spoke at that workshop. The lady that was hosting it decided not to have any more after that event, because they are very exhausting to plan. And so 2 years later, I thought, why are you waiting for someone else to host an event? You host it. You have a spirit to serve. That's what's in my heart, is to serve. So I planned the event, and the very first ticket I sold was to my husband. He was like, I want to buy your first ticket. And I was like, okay, you're amazing. So then, and he attended, the only man in the crowd, and he was there attending and supporting. And yeah. And then the next year I did the event. This last year I did it in November. Had to do it virtually, of course, because of COVID. Again, he was the first person to buy a ticket. and he'll probably be mad at me if I say this, but my idea of hosting the event was I wanted to donate to a bursary. I wanted to give money to a young high school girl going into college or university that has experienced trauma in her life and is still rising above and becoming the woman that she's meant to be. So my goal was to raise $500 for a bursary to help out. And I raised that. And then my husband came in and said, I'd like to match what you raised. So he donated $500 on top of it. And I was like, well, why are you doing that? And he's like, because it's important to you. If it's important to you, it's important to me.
Wow.
And I, right time, right place. But had I not loved myself, the universe wouldn't have brought him to me.
It's amazing. Thank you so much. It's amazing how people say, first is when you've dealt with yourself and start loving yourself, then you begin to attract like minds. I mean, before you were your life was so chaotic, you were just not in a good place. And that's why you kept on attracting, or you attracted the like of the guy you did, your ex, and he had issues. But when you now came to the understanding that you needed to work on you needed to love yourself because you lacked love. And many of us do. We seek validation from people, that have no business being around us, instead of working on ourselves. So the fact that you looked inwards, and I'm saying, I believe the listeners are hearing today, they're listening, and they now know they've got to focus on them, focus on you, love you. And when everything around you becomes peaceful and calm, you're going to attract someone that befits the value that has been put in you originally. And that's what you got. I mean, look at him fighting for your vision, supporting you all the way. I mean, which man goes to a women's conference? Hey, not once, twice. I mean, supporting your vision. That only could be the universe bringing you a complete person to complete you. And that just it's all you deserve anyway. I mean, you deserve more.
I'm gonna stop you just because you said something there. He doesn't complete me. He compliments me.
Compliments you, yeah.
Right.
Sorry. That's what I meant. I
was like, because I don't, that's what I thought.
Yeah, compliments you.
It's
absolutely.
it's like we're not. We don't need anybody to complete us or to make us whole. We are whole.
We are whole beings. Yes. We need another complete person and whole. To compliment you. So thank you so much for correcting me. Yeah. Yeah, that's so true because we need two whole beings to come together and work together in synergy, and you create a big force of positivity. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I was wondering if you have if you can give us any last words. You can tell the listener, especially someone going through similar life challenges as you, and what can they do to help themselves?
First of all, I would say don't give up. And this is from someone who was on the verge of giving up. So you're not alone. I think I knew mentally that I wasn't alone, but emotionally I felt alone. And I think that sometimes we don't connect those two things. So you're not alone. There's other people that are going through this. There are people that have gone through the circumstances you're going through. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. I know that tunnel can seem really long and dark at times, but there is a light there. Reach out, find support if you can, wherever you can. I mean, it's sometimes women are in situations where they can't tell, they're afraid of what happens, they're afraid of if it comes out and they do have children, what happens to their children. Like there's so many things and every situation is so different. But just know you're not alone. Try to get help and do the work for yourself. When you learn to love yourself and you understand that your value, like you are here, like you're not here by mistake, so many things had to happen in the universe for you to be here at this exact moment. So you are meant to be here, and the universe wants you to live the most amazing life.
Yeah.
And you have to believe that. And I know sometimes it's hard. If like me, you go through so much crap, you're like, how can I go through all this bad and now expect that I'm going to have good? But there's good out there. So just, I'm a big book reader. So I'm like, find the books that are going to, that you can relate to, that will help you build that inner strength. Because when you develop that inner strength and that inner love, you won't feel alone, because you're going to be, all those cracks are going to be fixed inside. You got to be a little cracked, because you got to let the light in, I always say. So just reach out. There's so many services and so many, organizations out there. So I just, I don't want anybody suffering in silence anymore. That's my goal. And I'll go out there and scream that message from the mountaintop as much as I have to. So.
Madden, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of this podcast, and it was really my pleasure to have you here today. I mean, we've been trying to fix this for a couple of weeks now, and voila, here we are. And I hope we can always invite you again to talk on this platform. And I am going to leave your link below if anyone wants to be in contact with you. And thank you again for coming and availing of this opportunity as my guest. Thank you so much.
And thank you for doing the work that you do. Thank you providing, this platform is saving lives.
Thank you.
So thank you for the work that you do.
Okay. Thank you so much. And
you're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Scared But Not Damaged podcast. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Scared But Not Damaged, so you don't miss a show. Kindly subscribe to the show so you know when new episodes are released, and leave us a review so we can continue to bring you amazing episodes. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.